Hello guys, welcome to Road to Adepticon 2014, and today it is another Malifaux-centric interview. You've noticed that I've been doing it a little bit differently on the Road to Adepticon. Instead of updates on myself, I bring people in to talk a little bit about Malifaux. Last week we had Sean, the TO, for all the Adepticon events, and this week we actually have Andrew Weekland, aka Guy in Suit on Twitter and the forum, aka two times Masters of Malifaux champion in a row.
Hi, yes, Andrew here. I have won Adepticon the last 2 years in a row, but this year I won't be going. So the door's wide open for a new champion. But I'm more than willing to share my experiences with previous Adepticons and maybe give some pointers to those who are going to try and make a run at the top.
Now, to start on a little bit of a lighter note, we heard from Lil Birds told us that you were actually so drunk winning that game that somebody had to shuffle your deck.
That did happen, yes. That was actually in the qualifier for Adepticon 2012. The first qualifier, they had two qualifiers, and I won the first qualifier. And I played against Dan Sulin, who was the former, he was the TO last year, and it was Victoria's versus Sonia, and I've just been having a great time, really meeting a lot of people, catching up with old friends, and before we started the event, we picked up a keg, one of those like 10-liter kegs from the local Chicago liquor store, and I was carrying that around with me, and by the end of the tournament, it was mostly empty, and I was having a really hard time. I was playing 52-card pickup every time I tried to shuffle my cards, so Dan was nice enough to find someone to shuffle my cards for me. That then I proceeded to top deck a red joker and kill Sonia like the very next turn. So thank you for ever shuffling my cards turn 3 in the final round.
I heard the game ended really, really fast.
It was very quick. It was a quick one. Obviously the old edition is possible with the right combination of cards to just take out a master no problem, and then they were, basically the game ended very quickly from that point onwards.
Now, let's get on with like a little bit of gaming history. Like, when did you start playing Malifaux, and
Sure.
what was your first experience playing it? All the basic stuff that usually people have in interviews.
Right. No, of course. I started in wargaming as a teenager. I played very casually. I may have went to like 1 or 2 tournaments in high school, and then kind of dropped out of it. Didn't really do it in college. Focused more on sports and video games and other stuff. Got back into it. I'd probably say a few years out of school when I met some cool guys who play at the Warmonger Club in New York City, and they're interesting people, and they're talking to them about games, and I figured I'd try it out again. I hadn't played serious tournaments when I was a kid, so I wanted to give that a try. Games Workshop was the be-all, end-all back then, which is still only probably 6 or 7 years ago, and people were playing Warhammer Fantasy. And then I started playing Fantasy. I went to a few GTs, got a flavor for the tournament crowd, like meeting guys from around the country and hanging out and playing tournaments and trying to do better and paint better and do everything better, and it was really fun. The hobby really sucked me back in. I really got into it. And then when 8th edition came out, it was a really drastic change, and a lot of the things I enjoyed about Fantasy and the armies I'd actually built were no longer viable. And I was just like, you know what? I've only really done Games Workshop. Since I've gone back in the game, I've only really tried one thing. I dabbled in a few board games, but other than that, I hadn't tried other companies' mini games. So I went searching. And I played some War Machine. I tried it out. I had one little Legion, not crew, Legion, what are they called? Armies, boards? I don't know. I had a Legion, and I played a few games of that. It was all right. It was fun. I tried playing some role-playing games. Wasn't necessarily my thing so much, and the modeling aspect, I liked the hobby stuff. That's what I found weird. I had seen their miniatures a few times. Like I looked at some of the models for role-playing games, and Malifaux had just come out, I want to say, 3 or 4 months. I think it was actually that Gen Con. The Gen Con, like a month or two before Games Workshop dropped 8th edition Warhammer, was when we were formally released Malifaux.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, sure, I'll try it out. I picked up Victoria's crew box. I'm like, hot chicks with swords and guns. I'm down. I've never painted anything like this before. Never modeled anything like this before. It's a very different style than orcs and elves or space marines. And gave it a try, and I really fell in love with it. I loved the card mechanic. I loved how it was so different from other games. And also, at the same time, I've been back in the hobby for maybe 5 years, and I was really finally starting to step my game up a little bit with painting. I mean, I'm still nowhere near your level. I'm not a crystal brush competitor, but I want to do a little better on my paint job. I want to have multiple highlights and blending and maybe some source lighting and stuff like that. And I realized that to do the techniques well, I can't paint 200 models. Like I was staring at a Bretonnian army with 50 knights and 100 men-at-arms, and just like
all those floor
right,
designs and everything.
Freehanding every single shield on 200 models. I'm never gonna come out of my room. I'll be there for years. So Malifaux was like, let's do this. Let's paint 8 models and get on the table and play. And it was great because a lot of other people were experimenting at the same time. I feel like people have been so entrenched in that Games Workshop scene that a lot of people were willing to branch out, try new things. I was able to pick up a few friends of mine to get into the game. Also, I feel like the game appealed a lot to guys who are more concentrated on the modeling side because it did have a different flavor and a different feel than other mini games out there. And we got into it. We got the ball rolling. I became a weird henchman and started running events. And then before you knew it, I was really into the game. I like the competitive aspect to it. I like the multiple strategies and schemes. You have to, play them all at once in order to achieve victory. And then I started I went to Adepticon. It was my first major tournament, I think. There weren't too many large Malifaux tournaments because obviously it's very new. And Adepticon, I missed the very first Adepticon that had Malifaux events. I think it only had like 14 players. The year after that was right after Book 2 came out. And I actually came in 4th because the initial Gaining Grounds document was just straight victory points. Whoever had the most victory points, you add them all up. So 4 games, you get 8 points a game, you get 32.
So there's no
so I had,
points or anything.
Yeah, so I went 4-0. Didn't lose won every single game, but ended up not winning because I only got 20-some odd victory points. And so they quickly learned that's not the way to run a tournament because then you have guys who are losing games getting 7 points, doing better than guys who win games with 6. You know what I mean? It didn't make any sense. So they fixed that one in the following year. But it was still a great time. I met everyone. I met a lot of great players. Dixon Giroux won that event, and I didn't get to play him because we missed each other because of the way the pairings worked out. And but I met him, talked to him. He was a savant. He was really into the game. He knew all the rules really well. I hadn't seen quite a few crews, so it was my first big event, and I saw a lot of new tricks and things whipped out that was interesting. And the following year, when that was right after Book 3 was released, Dreamer was out, Hammer was out. That was the year I finally got a chance to win, and they changed the format. They changed it to qualifiers, where you qualify, the top 4 from each heat qualify for the final 8. And then you play 3-round single elimination, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. Because obviously you can't do that in a Warhammer-sized game where games take 3 hours. There's just not enough time. And you have 100 guys in the room. You're not going to have a second day where you only have 8 playing. So that was really neat because they were able to run the single elimination on one side and then do like story encounter and open play on the other because everyone was involved and it was really interesting. And I won that event. I was really lucky to do so. It was really fun, really interesting. I had actually played the guy who I ended up beating in the finals in a qualifier, and he was playing Outcast that weekend, and so was I. So it was very interesting to compare. He's from, I believe, he was from Ohio, Cincinnati area, and he just, obviously nationwide, you have a very different take on the same things. Everyone has their own meta, their own local taste, their own friends who have their own advice and that sort of thing. And we had very different ways of playing Outcast. Yeah. In the first matchup, I played Gremlins, and he played the Victorias, and it went my way quickly, and I just blew him off the table, basically. Didn't have any models left in the turn 4. But then when I met him in the finals, he was like, he'd already played me once. He'd seen my tricks, my Gremlins, and the Ticket Pole and all that stuff. And he was like, all right, well, he's going to try something. Bring out the hammer, and he brought out Hamlin, which at the time was before the errata was incredibly powerful. Yeah. It was definitely an issue. And I pulled the switcheroo as well, and I ran out victorious. So I was playing a crew, he had played against me, and he was playing a crew that was very, very powerful. And I managed to get a really sneaky trick in and kill his henchman Nix, which is the ethereal dog, very early in the game, and eventually finally grinded out for a narrow victory to claim that one. And then I went back and kept henching, running events. I didn't really play competitively for a while. I ran one event, I think, at my store that I played in, and that was the only game I played a lot. When you're a henchman, obviously, your main objective is to get more people into the game, to grow the game. Yeah. And so I wasn't really focused on yeah, it's almost like the off season, like Gen Con, all those new models come out, and all these people rush to the booth and buy them, and all your people are talking about Malifaux online. So basically, from Gen Con to the next 3 months, it's like get new players in. That's what I did again. It's just henching people, giving demos, holding small events, doing maybe the painting a grow league, where you paint your crews for bonuses, stuff like that. It was really fun. Yeah. And then again, Adepticon comes around, start playing seriously again from probably January through March. Show up to Adepticon, same format. They had multiple. Actually, they changed it a little bit. They only had one. They had two. They didn't have 2 qualifying heats the same size. They had one large qualifier where the top 6 go, and then 2 other side events where the winner would go. So they changed it a little bit to qualify. And Dan actually said to me, he only had 7 qualifying spots in the tournament roster, so it was the top 5 from the main event and then 2 more, because he wanted me to play anyway. He wanted me to defend my title, so he gave me an automatic entry into the finals. I did end up qualifying by becoming a 3rd in the main event, regardless, but it was just kind of nice to say, well, you better defend your title. So that was kind of nice of Dan to do that. So we got our 8 players. We did our single win again. Book 4 had released, 10 Thunders were out. Ended up playing. There was quite a bit of 10 Thunders there last year. Long story short, I ended up facing Dixon in the final, and I took it home again for back-to-back wins, and was very happy about that. It was nice to have everyone kind of gathering around cheering us on. It was a pretty neat side effect of single elimination is people get very interested because everyone knows this is the top table.
This was the year that we met, right?
This was the year that I played you in doubles.
Yes.
I played against you in doubles.
You massacred us in doubles, yes.
Yeah, we did massacre you pretty bad. I blame your partner. He dragged you down, I gotta say. But, that was your first year playing Malifaux, right? Or would you? I didn't see you.
That was my first year playing Malifaux, and that was my first year being an Adepticon too, and in a team tournament. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I had been Adepticon the year before that, or actually, sorry, go back. I'd been Adepticon 3 years in a row. That was my 3rd Adepticon at that point. There's Malifaux events. Either they were so small they weren't happening, or I wasn't playing. I can't remember what the story was with the first Adepticon. So I played Warhammer, and I played War Machine, that first Adepticon. So you can definitely see that I went from playing Warhammer and War Machine to playing a small tournament of Warhammer and then lots of Malifaux, and then just playing all Malifaux in my 3rd Adepticon. So I kind of transitioned through Adepticons from various games.
I'm going to be staying at the Malifaux room a lot of times now this year too, because I canceled out a couple of events that I was supposed to be in, so I could actually put in more Malifaux games. And I've also scheduled a lot of games with whoever I knew that they were coming to Adepticon, just to do demo games or even just have a friendly game. And with me and Wargamer Girl is going to have a recorded game as well. She does really good battle reports with like flying graphics and stuff. So I'm looking forward to do that. But one of the main questions of this interview is, next week we're actually going to have Chuck from a weird place to actually talk about the major changes from 1.5 to M2E. But what I wanted to talk to you about is the changes from 1.5 to M2E in terms of competition. Like the
you know what? That's a really good topic, and I almost guarantee you right now, where I've been playing Malifaux and how much I've been playing it and how new the rules are, that if I were to be going to Adepticon in a few weeks, I would not be very confident, frankly, because there's so many unknowns, and there's so many new things out there. We just had the Wave 2 cards come out in PDF form like a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't even played half of those crews yet. I've never played against Tony. I've never played against the new Gremlin, Ma Tuckett.
Yeah.
I've only played a few games against the Brewmaster. He's only been out for 8 months. All this stuff is so new, and because the game is so, I want to say it's definitely easier to pick up now than it was, but it's still very, very hard to master. And I just haven't been, grinding out tournament-style games long enough to know what to expect. I think it's going to be a wide-open field.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be anyone's game. Also, Sean changed the format a lot. It's now going to be, the main event is no longer qualifiers and then single elims. It's just one giant event across 2 days with a ton of rounds.
Yeah, 6 rounds.
Yeah, the top player is still going to win, I think, because there's so many rounds. It's definitely a very different mindset and a very different game, because previously, it was, I actually prefer the single elim format. I think it benefits my playstyle and benefits my temperament, because it's, when you qualify, it's all about just getting in. You don't have to worry about, grinding out every single point to get the highest score at the end. You just got to get enough wins to place and then move on from there. And also, I feel like I'm very good at guaranteeing a minor win, whereas other players, in the way they place their crews and the way they choose their objectives, they choose their schemes, they try to max out wins. They try to get really big differentials.
Yeah.
That's never really been my favorite play style. I prefer to basically either trick or trap my opponent into giving me a guaranteed minor win, versus trying to pressure them and push them to force my way to a major win. So that format obviously works well. Pushing your way in and trying to get maximum points works really well in a 6-round event where it's going to come down to matchups and differential and get as many points as you can and coming out on top of for 6 rounds. Because with that many rounds, you could actually lose or draw a game and still win if you have enough differential on your other games.
Yeah, and one of the changes that affects the new tournament is the scheme pool, because 1.5 you had a lot of people actually planning out their schemes because they can't use it on the next round, where they keep the easy ones, like I heard about a Misaki crew where they just turtle up at the end of the corner because he had that Misaki's scheme where if she didn't complete any of the schemes or something, and they get 4 victory points automatically or something. I forgot what scheme that was.
No, it's a 10 Thunders scheme in the old edition that basically allowed you to say, if your opponent gets no points from one scheme, then you get 2 points. I can't remember what it's called. Basically, so if your opponent has, like, they try to save Assassin or kill Protege, and you just take the foil, you're going to hide and get points and they don't get any. That was actually a very interesting thing to think about in the old tournaments. And you actually couldn't run a 6-round event because you'd run out of schemes.
Yeah.
You'd have, which would be interesting because you'd have to take terrible schemes that you definitely weren't going to score. But they fixed that whole thing. There's no little mini game about schemes, because before some schemes, as you said, were very easy. Mm-hmm. Other ones were nearly impossible for certain crews to ever achieve. Now with the scheme pool system, we could probably go into more detail. If you don't know Malifaux, the way it changed was before you had basically a long list of objectives that were standard for your faction plus all the basic ones, and you just pick 2 each game, right?
Yeah.
And so in a tournament, to keep you from just picking the easiest 2 over and over again, which why wouldn't you do that? They force you to only pick a scheme once. So the strategy you alluded to was you save the easier schemes for the harder matchups. So if I'm playing a crew that has low willpower across the board, and I end up facing Neverborn, maybe one of the masters like Pandora that targets willpower, I'm like, all right, I'm at a disadvantage this round. I'm going to use up my easier schemes to try to get some victory points. And I would do a lot in single elimination too. Early rounds, you're playing lower seeds. You want to get your harder schemes out of the way because if you don't have easy schemes later on, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
The new system, it's not like that at all. You don't have a whole long laundry list of schemes you can pick the easier hard ones from. Instead, you have a randomly generated or tournament organizer generated scheme pool that you share with your opponent. So it's impossible for you to ever have easier or harder schemes to choose from than your opponent because you have the same schemes. And you can pick the same ones. So you have a pool of 5 schemes each round, and you then pick 2 from that pool. And so, because it's a mutual pool, you can't have an unfair advantage that way. There's no little mini game across the tournament of saving or using your scheme. So it definitely makes it more balanced. It makes it more fair, and it allows you to run, I want to say, more esoteric lists. You don't have to run lists that are good at a specific scheme. You have to take lists that are you can tailor them and try and change them a lot more often. Whereas before, you mentioned players would plan their schemes out across the entire day.
Yeah.
Right? They'd look at all the strategies, know all the schemes in advance, and just try and build one perfect list, memorize it, and run that list through the gauntlet. It's a very kind of Horde's War Machine style, where the most important phase in the tournament is the list building phase. Can you build a list that's going to have the right tool to deal with all the other top lists? A lot of people brought that mindset into Malifaux. And the game designers designed Malifaux not to be that way. They wanted it to be different. And so I feel like a lot of players did that to their detriment in 1.5. They run only various lists they do really well. I would say that's fine if you feel confident only in that list. Don't take things you don't know how to use. Obviously, you're gonna fall on your face if you're taking something you have no idea how to use it. Mm-hmm. But don't ever limit yourself and think that I have the best list, nothing can top it.
Yeah.
Every single list can be tailored and tweaked because the scenarios there's an order of magnitude of diversity, and there's no way that one set of models is inherently better than others. It's just not true.
Sorry.
Keep your mind. Go ahead. I was like, keep your mind open to new possibilities.
So would you say that this new style of scheme pool kind of encouraged you to work with one master or one crew, and kind of try to figure out how they work with different schemes instead of having a whole faction to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the edition change, I would encourage any players, experienced or not, to limit your selection pool because of the complexities inherent in some of the interactions of the models, as well as the strategies and schemes. If I was playing Adepticon in 2 weeks, I would probably only bring I'd say 2, maybe 3 masters for my faction, and a limited model selection. Near the end of 1.5, I've been playing that system for 4 years. I'd read every single model. I'd played against most of them in tournaments. If not in tournaments, I'd played them casually with friends or online on Vassal. And I felt like I knew everything. I could say with some level of authority, okay, I'm going to make an entirely new list and try to accomplish something different. It's because the game's so new and there's so many new things out there, it's almost like too much choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe some people have. I don't feel like I've had enough time to fully digest. Like I said, some of these rules came out a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
No one's had enough time to fully digest all the diversity of options and models. I finally got my head around this whole scheme pool idea, which is brand new and very different way of playing, and that's from Gen Con last August. And to have the ability to know all the stuff, to be able to say, all right, I'm going to choose a completely different crew from a whole huge pool of models every time. It's a very cool option to have, and it's really interesting, but it's more than you probably want to try to digest in the 5 minutes while you're setting up for a tournament game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want to try and start over at square one every single time you start a new game. You want to have some basis, some common ground you're comfortable with. And I feel like most players kind of naturally fall into that pattern. Mm-hmm. You have the models you like. You have certain things you either have confidence in or feel like you really have a good grasp on how they work. And then you can kind of tailor and tweak on the edges. Like maybe I'm going to drop out this close combat model for a long-range model because of the way the terrain looks.
Yeah.
Or maybe I have a scheme where I need to keep the model alive. Let's make sure I can have a nice tough model with either high armor or block of wounds or something. But let's not change let's not throw out the entire shop and start over with something new every single round. It's cool that choice is there. I think it's something very unique that Malifaux has other games don't. But don't fall in that trap of trying to take advantage of that flexibility and overcomplicate things and make it harder for yourself to succeed.
Now, would you say that people that are playing the Wave 2 Masters would have a little bit more advantage because basically their opponents probably see the Masters a little bit less on the board at this moment?
Yeah. If I was going to come out and try to win the thing, I would be playing Brewmaster. Mm-hmm. Just that'd be my choice because he is brand new. People expect him, and a lot of people haven't played him very much. Mm-hmm. Terra was going to be my choice. I like Terra a lot too, but I feel like there are certain matchups she struggled in that I wasn't. That's the thing too. Is I'm also learning it for the first time, so I'm saying I really like these crews. I've played 10 games of them. My opponent's never seen them. I have an advantage, but I've only played 10 games. I haven't had time to play 20, 30 games to really master a master. So I make one mistake. It doesn't matter what my opponent, how their experience is. If I make a mistake and they can capitalize on that, that can be a really big disadvantage. But I think this early, because it's so early and because so many players have hardly played at all, obviously having playing something no one's ever seen before is going to be to your advantage. Just make sure you know it well enough not to trip over your own feet and make a mistake and leave yourself vulnerable. But I think we'll see a lot of that. I think people are going to be trying to win it. Are going to be taking some Wave 2 stuff. Remember, a lot of it's been in beta for a while. So if you were an intensive beta tester, you have seen a lot of this stuff for a while. My group actually kind of dropped out of the testing in the late beta because we've been testing M2E since April of last year. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of burnt out on all the playtesting. We playtested Wave 1, we playtested Wave 2 before it went to beta. So when it was all out in beta, we were like, sigh of relief. We can take a break finally. And we've been concentrating on our Blood Bowl League the last few months. But a lot of people were really involved in the beta, which, thank you for putting the time to tweak and finalize all the testing that the initial group did. But they have a good feel of these models, so they should be pretty confident. But I feel like quite a few players will see some crews they've never seen before. Hopefully we see some cool conversions because there's a lot of great new models out that don't have models yet. And I've already seen some really beautiful sculpting and conversion work for some of these models, so hopefully we see a lot of good stuff. That's actually what I'm going to miss most about Adepticon, not even the competition, is that it's some of the best painting and the best modeling in that Malifaux room you'll see anywhere all weekend.
That's just the Malifaux room. There's a lot of other rooms that you can watch people play.
Yeah, and you see some great painters from all over the country come out, and everyone does a great job painting. I feel like that's one thing I definitely, back in the day when I was kind of choosing, do I want to play War Machine more, do I want to play Malifaux more? They both have tournament games. War Machine had a much bigger tournament scene. It had more competitive players, like more events. It's easier to find events, and you have to drive so far or fly to Chicago to play an event. But the Malifaux players had a very different ideology around modeling and painting. Yeah, and they really prioritized the story and the look So a lot of people played thematic crews, even if it was to their detriment, just to have the models they wanted to paint and play together. And also people really prioritize the painting. Even players who may not be the most technically skilled painters still put in a lot of effort and time and made their crews look good and look cohesive.
I see less gray models of Malifaux on the table.
Yeah.
And
part of it's go ahead.
I also believe that Malifaux draws in more female gamers than any other games.
Oh, absolutely. I think Malifaux has some strong female characters in it, in the story, that are interesting to female players. Interesting to me too. I always like to read something different. How exciting is it to hear about Sergeant so-and-so Space Marine killing aliens over and over again. Malifaux has much more nuanced storylines, a lot more diversity in both types of characters as well as their motives. And I wouldn't say we have a huge set of female players, but definitely larger than I ever encountered in War Machine or Games Workshop. And I think that shows you that the game offers a lot. It's not that female gamers are this weird, exotic creature. They're not that different from you and I, but they may have slightly different tastes, and that also has a more diverse things to offer. It has a very interesting story, a very interesting theme, very interesting models, and it draws in a more diverse group of gamers sometimes than like your hardcore, tournament War Machine style game. So it's good. I think it's a great thing. You meet a bunch of people. I'm sure you're very excited to meet some new people this weekend for a couple weeks. I'm very jealous I can't go. For those of you wondering, I actually had a social engagement. We have a good friend of ours getting married that weekend. So unfortunately, we're not going to make it. I'm not ducking you guys. I would love to play all you guys, but unfortunately, I can't get out of this wedding, so I'm not going to make it this year.
Well, that's good. You're opening up, for other people to try to win it this year.
It's going to be a wide open field. Honestly, I don't think I've been playing enough of the new stuff to really have a great grasp on a lot of it. I mean, I'm sure I would probably get stopped by someone who's mastered like the new Karis list that I've never even seen or something. It's going to be a wide open field. Everyone's going to have a good shot. I think the format is very interesting and different. I have no experience in a Malifaux tournament that has 6 rounds, so I'm really curious to see how that goes. Hopefully you guys do a good job during your games of updating your Twitter feed so I can keep tabs on all you guys while I'm sitting there at the reception on Saturday. So I look forward to seeing what happens. I'm really interested to see what comes out of this. It's the first big event that we've had in the United States for M2E. That I know of. I mean, I threw an event at the Warsaw weekend. We had 20 players. That was a pretty decent size back in October before Wave 2 even came out. And that was fun. It was interesting, but it was a much smaller set of models because Wave 2 is double the size of Wave 1. There's more models in Wave 2 than in Wave 1. So it's now, I want to say, probably 130, 140% more variety. And I have no idea what's going to come out on top. I have no idea what factions people are playing. I saw a lot of people online are talking about playing Rezzers. A lot of people playing Arcanists. Both those are 2 factions you didn't see a ton of in 1.5 because they just weren't that effective in a lot of tournament style play. The entire world's in turn on its head with the new edition, and every faction has very viable and powerful combinations.
Yes.
Every master has very different playstyles within that faction.
Yep.
I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm really excited to see what happens, and I think I'll be waiting with bated breath to see who comes out on top.
Now, speaking of big events, ever since I got involved with A Weird Place, the Facebook group, I became, I guess, someone that in the background that helped Chrissy, the head of A Weird Place, to host Malifaux. I don't know if you've seen that post before. So that is a weird sanctioned event, and also WGC, the group that I belong to, it's going to be like a joint kind of event where it's going to be a 2-day event. It's not going to be as big as Adepticon, but I heard the prize pool is going to be like off the roof. And
They're both in California?
It's in California, and this is happening in June 8th and 9th, I believe. And this is something that started off being like a small tournament, and then suddenly the 2 groups, Weird and WGC, were like, all right, we'll do something for you. And all right, we'll do something for you. And it suddenly just became like a weird weekend kind of thing.
No, it's great. That's what kind of happened. I mean, I had a long conversation on with the guys from Guessing Zero on their podcast. Mm-hmm. We had a chat after around the first day of Warsaw weekend back in October, which is a tournament I threw in New Jersey, a 3-day event with 3 different Malifaux tournaments. We got, as I said, it was still fairly small. 20 players, not a large event. You compare it to other systems like Warhammer still gets 50, 60 players every time they have a weekend event. Sometimes up to 100. War Machine tournaments are going strong. You always see 50 people at random hobby playing War Machine. We talked a lot about what needs to happen for Malifaux to be larger, and I encourage you guys to listen to the conversation. I was a little bit drunk, but still somewhat coherent. We were saying, Weird is still growing, and it's still a very new game, and the edition change did make it harder to kind of keep things rolling because they had a brand new rule set come out, and a lot of people took some time to digest it. They released it over multiple months. Like Wade said, Wave 2 just came out, whereas the original book came out last August. And it was tough for me to throw an event between those two.
Yeah.
Because I only had the Wave 1 book. It was a very limited selection of models, a very limited selection of rules, and people just got in their hands. Like, I lost a lot of players. I got a good friend of mine who's really into Malifaux, likes it a lot, but his only painted crew was Kirai and Colette.
Yeah, and they're Wave 2. So.
And he's like, sorry, dude, I got to play War Machine because you got a painting requirement, and both my crews are Wave 2 crews, so I can't join you. And so we didn't quite have as many people as I'd hoped. I was hoping for around 32. But I feel like June is a much better time frame. Wave 2 will have been out for a while, so hopefully you guys have good success picking up a large number of people, and we'll see what goes from there. Because that's all it takes is once you get the ball rolling on these events, they kind of snowball, and people come around, they hear about them, they want to go. A lot of stuff is still word of mouth, even with the internet and podcasts and everything. People listen to other people actually went to the event. So hopefully the Malifaux scene does grow and take off. There's nothing I want more than be able to have multiple 60-plus people events to go to near me that I don't have to fly to.
I know.
But until then, there are big events out there. Just you got to travel a little bit. We're not going to be as spoiled as the guys over in Europe and the UK who have events in every single small town because the hobby is so much more. I guess we'll just play over there. Per capita, I mean, America's a big place. Cities are far apart. Like if you were to go from LA to San Francisco, it's not like going from two cities in the UK where they're 50 miles apart. They're like 500 miles apart.
Yeah,
so, it's a bit different.
Yeah, that was the original idea of Malifaux, because we have two groups, like SoCal Malifaux and A Weird Place, and we wanted to have something for California where that's going to be. I already designed. I put in my design onto like a laser cutter where it's going to be a special trophy where it's kind of like a Stanley Cup that you pass around. So if crews coming from SoCal coming up and then try to grab the trophy from them, and then the next year, they can try to claim it back or whatever.
No, that's great. That's really good. We have a very successful thing we started about 10 years ago called Nuke, which is Northeast Warhammer Club Championship. It's a similar idea. It's a trophy. We've been passing it around. It's kind of died down in the size of it because less people are playing the Warhammer 40K and Warhammer games. But it was a really cool idea and really, really great, and everyone loved it because you get to put it in your club for a year and put it up on the rack and everyone sees it, and then you got to defend your title. It's a pretty fun thing to do. Guys, try that here in Malifaux. Guys down in Fairfax, I can't remember the name of the club actually that started it, but they started a little like Northeast Malifaux plaque, and I got to hold on to it for about 6 months. I drove down there and won an event down there and took it home with me, but they came back and took it away from me a few months later. But this was all probably 2 or 3 years ago now, and like I said, the edition change has kind of tempered the competitive scene. It's going to take a little bit to get it back up. Yeah. But hopefully it does come back soon. I've seen more people than ever are playing Malifaux. I think one of the things is because the game is so new, it's hard to play tournament level and competitively because it takes a long time to master these things. Yeah. These are not simple things to figure out. Wargaming itself, just as a hobby, is pretty complex. You got to acquire the models, you got to assemble them, paint them, learn what the heck they do, learn all the rules, play a bunch of games to figure it out. These are really complex games, all of them are. And Malifaux is even more so in some ways because even though the barrier to entry is pretty low, it's pretty easy to get 5-6 models out, put their cards out, play the game, understand the game. Because of all the multi-layered interactions between models, it's much more complex strategically and tactically than some of the other games. It's very, very difficult to be a top-level player in Malifaux. I feel like it takes a really long time to get to that level of play. And honestly, I haven't been playing very consecutively in a few months. I was playing a lot back in the fall with the playtest, but I haven't played a lot in, like, say, January, February. And I feel like I wouldn't be that strong of a player right now because you have to play a lot get that level.
Because it's not Malifaux. I think it's not like it's pushing 2 giant blocks of your army against another giant block and then see roll dice to see if it works. Because if you change one model in your crew, the synergy changes.
Yeah, it's not even that too. I mean, Warhammer and War Machine definitely require a lot of skill to win. You see the same top players winning events, but because so much of it happens offline, well, not offline, not during the game itself, because list building is so important and deployment is so important, you can practice all that stuff and plan it out ahead of time. It allows players to kind of prep work and do all their legwork ahead of time. Just surf the internet, find the very best list, find out how to deploy it, plan it all ahead of time, and then kind of execute. Whereas Malifaux is not like that at all. You have to do everything on the fly, on your feet. You can't really prepare that much. You can think about the strategies and schemes and know how they all operate and maybe interact, but you can't plan ahead because there's so many variables that don't exist in other games. Terrain has a huge factor in how you play. Opponent's crew has a huge factor in how you play. You don't know what that is, so you don't even see what you're playing against until the very last second. The scheme interaction, very huge in that how you play. And the models you take, which change constantly, have a huge interaction in how you play. You can't prepare and pre-plan so much, so you have to be able to think more on your feet and do things off the cuff, which takes more practice. Like once you've played a lot, you kind of know these things right off the top of your head. Like when I was playing Adepticon last year, I would look at the schemes, I would look at the strats, I would look at the opponent's faction. I had a good idea what he was taking. I knew what I was taking. I'd be ready in like a minute. Like I knew it. I kind of had it all. Like a lot of muscle memory develops.
Yeah.
You look at the terrain, you think, well, here are the main alleyways I can shoot through. Here's the main alleyways I can charge around. Where can I place my minis? I want to take this guy to put him here. This guy to put him here. My opponent's probably going to be over there. Like you can kind of figure it all out. It becomes habitual. But if you're not playing a lot, it's not going to be habitual.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying these events are going to snowball. Once we start getting bigger events, if people get playing them more, they'll be more comfortable to play in more events. They'll have more and more things happening. And a lot of people are new. You see it on the Weird Place a lot. People are just getting involved for the first time. It's going to take some time, but hopefully we have some success and get some larger events going because I love playing Malifaux. I love playing it even more in big tournaments.
Now, would you agree with the statement that you can't really prepare much for Malifaux because you know how in dice there's only 1 in 6 probability, where in cards is 1 in 54. So all the outcome is, would you agree with that statement?
I would strongly disagree with that statement.
Okay.
I think the way that the randomizer works in Malifaux is much more predictable, and you can plan for much better. It's possible to show up to a game with a dice-based system and roll nothing but ones the entire game. It can happen. I mean, it won't happen, but there's literally no way of preparing for the fluctuations. Whereas in a closed 54-card deck, if you go through the entire deck, you will have played all your 13s and all your aces. So it's a fixed probability set. You'll get X number of good cards and X number of bad cards and X number of cards in between. What's considered good or bad depends on what you're trying to do, obviously. And that's something I should talk about at length because that's what makes really good players, I feel like, in this game as well, is card management is a huge part we haven't even touched on. We've been talking for half an hour about tournament play, and we didn't touch on one of the biggest things in the game that makes it a good tournament game. Sorry, I just totally glossed over that because I feel like I do very well and don't think about too much, but it is something that you should definitely learn to do if you're trying to be a tournament Malifaux player, is card management. People, when you first start playing, you're like, oh, you flipped the 13 at the perfect time. It killed my model. It totally lost me the game. And all I flipped was aces and twos, every time I needed a good card. And I was just, I had bad luck and luck. And yes, you will have bad luck, and your opponent will, as they say, top deck good cards sometimes when they need them, and you'll feel like, you got a little hosed in the luck department. However, if you look at the way the game works, you'll get all your kings will come out and all your aces will come out if you play it through the deck. If you don't play through the deck, that's something you can control. Whether how often you flip cards, how often you do interactions with other models or your own models that cause you to flip cards, you can control that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can cycle cards very easily by taking actions that require you to. You can avoid cycling cards by just moving around or interacting instead of interacting with casting spells or attacking enemy model. And knowing what's in your deck is a huge advantage. If you can count cards, I would recommend dabbling in that. You don't have to be a successful card manager, but it does help. It makes it a little easier if you know what your count is and what's in your deck. I do count cards in tournaments. I don't count cards when I play at the club with my friends. It's just not worth the effort. It's a little bit draining mentally, and after a long day at the office, when I get to the club and play games, I can have fun. Even if you're not counting cards, it's a lot to think about. What do you draw in your hand, right? If you draw like a great hand, you're like, oh man, this is awesome. I'm totally going to do great this turn. I have all these good cards. I'm going to, cast all these awesome spells with these suits or use these severe damage cards to do lots of damage to my opponent, what have you. People that then get bad cards are like, oh, this turn sucks. I can't do anything. What am I going to do? Guess what? You still have 6 cards, and cards are still a resource even if they're aces. They can be discarded for defensive stance. They can protect you from enemy special abilities. They can be used for all sorts of things that just require you to discard a card. And they can be a threat. If you're holding 6 cards, they may be complete garbage. As long as you have a good poker face, your opponent doesn't know that, and has to plan accordingly. Yep. So there's a lot of bluffing. There's a lot of subtleties that come with card management. And guess what? If all the bad cards are in your hand, then the good cards are in the deck. So what that means, it means you got to cycle your deck. It's pretty simple concepts like that that can really make a huge difference in your success rate for getting the duels you need. Also, positive and minus and negative twists to duels can have a very large effect.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're throwing out, if your deck is really hot, and you have a lot of very powerful cards in your deck because you've been either counting cards or seeing that all your bad cards are in your hand or have already come out. You then know you want to try and get even or positive. Even twists are fine because you're probably going to get a good card.
Yeah, you're fishing out more cards.
Right. If you have a poor deck, you're going to get positive flips because otherwise you're never going to get a card high enough to hit your opponent. So you should focus your shot. Yeah. Things like that. Yeah. So if you have a poor deck, you're always going to focus, even though it seems like a waste. Like, well, if I could do more damage by taking 2 shots rather than 1. But my deck is poor. I know most of my good cards are either been used, or and I have a poor stack in my deck, or I call it a low count. So I count negative for high cards and positive for bad cards. So when I have a very low number, it means I've already used most of my high cards. So if I have a low count, I want to always focus because the key in Malifaux, the way the stats work, is you basically compare your stat, and the difference in the stats is you then add the card to each stat, and then you success or fail based on whether you're higher or lower than your opponent. So depending on the way the stats line up, unless I have a large stat advantage, I know that I'm probably going to flip below average, like say below an 8.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to focus to make sure I get that 8, 9, 10 or higher to actually hit my opponent, because a lot of new players make this mistake. They'll look at their damage profile. They'll look at, well, I'm probably going to do a negative twist on damage because I won't beat them by 5 or more no matter what. And my damage profile is, say, 2, 3, 4, right? So if I shoot twice, I can do up to 4 damage with 2 negative twists. However, that's almost always a mistake unless your count is really high, because you're not going to hit. You're just not going to hit your opponent unless you have a large stat advantage. So the chance to do 4 damage and then doing 0 is much worse than the much higher chance of doing a reliable 2 damage. Yeah. Or even possibly 3, because when you focus, remember you add to both the attack and the damage. So these are things you learn over time. It takes some time to get a feel for, and they didn't change from the last edition. So there's something I actually do. That's one thing I definitely can still do successfully. I may not know what the heck half the crews do because they're all brand new and just got released, but that's definitely something you can learn and pick up. And a lot of players, it's very subtle. It's not as subtle. Other games aren't very subtle. They're like, well, you got to roll 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can roll lots of 5s on that d6. You're gonna do awesome. Or you got to roll like 3d6 and get a 10 or higher to break armor or whatever it might be. It's very obvious. Like, well, how do I make that easier? Well, let's just stack the odds. Let's get a bunch of bonuses. And instead of roll 10, I have to roll a 5. That's way easier. Yeah. It's not that simple in Malifaux. It's much more complicated, and it takes a while to figure these things out because the probability is much more complex because it's an enclosed system. You can't. It's not just pure randomness. The cards are fixed. So once some cards are gone, basically every time you flip a card, the odds change. Yeah. Which is a total mind bender. Like try to think about that. Like when you start the game, you have 54 cards. All right, I have a 1 in 54 chance of flipping the black joker. You draw a hand, you don't get a black joker. Now I have a 1 in 48 chance of flipping the black joker. Like you can't keep track of that throughout the game for every single card. It's just crazy. Like I need a 10 of Rams or higher. That's 4 cards in the deck. I've already seen the 11 of Rams go out. That's 3 cards left. There's 37 cards left. You're not going to do that kind of math in your head on the fly. It's not going to happen. You can try.
It's like you're playing poker while playing miniature game.
And yeah, exactly. If you're like the deep blue chess computer, maybe you have a chance of playing Malifaux that way. It's not going to happen. That's what makes the game interesting. Is that when you first start playing it, it seems like, whoa, this is totally random. I have no idea how the fate is twisting. I have no idea what's going to happen. Anything can happen at any time. It's great. It's really fun. It's dynamic. And then you get like you fall in that trough after like say a dozen games or so. You're like, oh, luck is driving all my success. I keep getting bad cards, or I keep getting lucky. I only win because I'm getting lucky. And then you start figuring out how to manage the system. It is a lot harder to figure out than a dice system where all you have to do is get the right bonuses. It's like, it's easier to roll 2 pluses than 5 pluses. And once you get the hang of it and you start seeing these things and you realize how to manage your hand, how to use cards in your hand to your advantage even when they're not strong cards, how to use soul stones to counteract good or bad cards, like when to burn a soul stone to draw new cards, when to use a soul stone to add a suit, and also the really high level stuff, which it's going to take, I have to sit and think about to write it all down, like all the advice I could give, but how to manage things like how fast to cycle your deck, especially if you're counting cards. Whether to focus or not is a great one to think about if you're just getting into Malifaux, because that does severely change the odds of success on an action. It also costs you other potential actions. Focusing, for those who don't know, means instead of taking 2 discrete actions, you take 1 more powerful action. So basically you focus your energy into a single attack. So you lose an attack, but you have a better chance of success, and whether that's worth it or not. Because I've also played situations where focusing is a very bad decision. I've seen players focus when they don't need to, and they wasted the chance of moving to grab an objective or do something else. The game is just so complex. I mean, I'd love to maybe write a blog post about this. You're actually a lot of thoughts are coming back to me now that I haven't had in a while. I've been playing that much, and I need to explore these ideas again. And I look forward to hearing from the players who get to play at Adepticon, because having not played in a large event, I'm sure there's lots of things I haven't seen yet in this new edition that'll shake out. Like, I learned a lot in my first Adepticon when I didn't win, when I played, just by playing against 4 other opponents or 5 other opponents who I'd never played before, who were competitive players playing different crew lists, picking different schemes than I expected, using different styles of play. Like, some players would try to be very evasive and run away from me and almost never interact. Other players would dedicate all their force and play a very attrition-based game and just kind of rush at you and try to beat you down. Different play styles we'll see. And because it's a large event with just a global field, there's going to be guys from the UK coming over to play you guys. So hopefully we get to hang out with some of those guys. Say hi to Mike Marshall for me if you bump into him.
He is sponsoring with the Adepticon deck this year.
Oh, is he? I heard he was trying to do that. I saw on Twitter he was posting about it. I'm glad he got it pulled everything together to get that for you guys. Yeah, I love my Adepticon deck.
It's going to be the deck and also the strategies and schemes deck.
Awesome. I need to do Steam Deck. Maybe I'll have to try to bribe him to steal one for me.
I know he's going to have a lot of extras, so you just have to talk to him. But we are going towards the end of the, I guess, video cast now. It's not podcast anymore. But if we have to summarize things, if this whole video is about competitive Malifaux play, if we have to summarize things, and then if from you're talking and then me getting the ideas was basically to become a little bit more competitive or to become a better player in the competitive Malifaux scene, you would have to maybe manage your cards better. Being a better card manager helps. Also, knowing the opponent or knowing all the models, but the disadvantage right now is since the Wave 2 just came out, so you would probably not have had a practice time with Wave 2. Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I would probably say we kind of rambled in a different order. If I had to prioritize them, I'd say the very first and most important thing for players. So say you're brand new, you want to play in tournaments and do a little better and improve your play style. The very first thing to concentrate on is knowing your own crew and knowing how they interact with each other and what they can and can't do. The way you fail in that case would be to try to do something you couldn't do, overextend, make a mistake, and get punished for it, or only do certain specific things and not know the full range of capabilities your crew could have.
Okay.
I'm going to give 2 specific examples and say, don't assume your crew can only do one thing. Try to learn everything it can do so you always know your full toolbox when you go into your situation. Second most important thing is strategies and schemes, and you can find tons of posts about this. Everyone realized that right away when the new edition dropped. The way the scheme pool works, the way picking the right schemes for the strategy and the right crews for that. I don't need to go into detail on that at all, but everyone knows that what I'm talking about is played some Malifaux. Knowing your strategy schemes is number 2 after knowing your own crew. The third one is what you touched on, which is the card management. Card management is huge in this game. You can say a little broader in terms of resource management. A lot of players think about all things as different resources, like cards are one resource, soul stones are another, action points are a third. I don't really think that way. I tend to treat them a little differently. I think of what models do and how they do it is one thing, whereas managing your probabilities to your advantage is another thing. So I kind of break this throughout in my mind. A lot of times it's like, oh, cards are cards. You can use them for this or that. I try to manage the entire deck at once, not just the cards in my hand. So that's obviously, it takes a little bit more. You gotta concentrate a little harder to try and manage the cards that you can't see. But I feel like that's a very important place of high-level play. And the fourth one, I think actually the less important one is knowing your opponent's crew sometimes. Unless it's something that's really going to be a bad matchup for you or a specific ability that really kind of tears out the Achilles heel of your crew, usually you're not going to be punished too badly for not knowing exactly what every one of their models do. But trying to understand how your opponent's going to execute their strategies so you can counteract that is a very subtle thing, but can have a huge impact on winning or losing the games. So in that order, I'd say that's first thing, know your crew. Next thing, know how to win the game, which is obviously very important. Third thing, manage your cards, not just cards in your hand, but try to know whether you should be selecting your deck and what's in your deck. And finally would be knowing the ins and outs and the details of your opponent's crew to get that last little advantage to come out on top.
I think you sum it up pretty nicely, especially in that priority order. Now, if people wants to contact you, for tips or if they want to get a Vassal game with you, how do they do that?
I definitely need to play more Vassal games, so thank you for bringing that up. I recommend anyone who hasn't played Vassal to go out and try it. To reach me, Twitter is the best way. I use Twitter almost exclusively for miniature wargaming, so Malifaux, Blood Bowl, Warhammer, whatever. Hit me up on Twitter. It's @GuyInSuit with underscores between the words. I'm sure you can post it up in the notes.
I will have the link down below.
Yep. Follow me. I'll follow you back. I'm always wanting to see what people are talking about when it comes to Malifaux. Whenever you pay a new mini, by all means, I love to see that stuff. I always see your miniatures on the Facebook group. Mario, those are really good.
Thank you.
I will be over in the UK. I'm going to be playing in the Scottish GT in June. I believe it's June 22nd. So I look forward to meeting some of the UK guys over there, the Scots, and whoever comes up from England. And I will be at Gen Con. So if you see me at Gen Con, come up and say hi.
Oh, that's a lot of traveling.
It will be fun.
Oh, speaking of Vassal, actually, a weird place actually started talking to Weird Miniatures, and we might gonna start having the Henchmen are organizing to actually have Vassal demos for people who never had Vassal game before.
That's really neat. That sounds like a great idea because Vassal is very hard. If you read my article in the Weird Chronicles 2 months back, I wrote about my struggles learning Vassal this fall when I got tabled by Joel Hendry. But it is, once you do pick it up, it is a really great way to get in extra games when you don't have time to make it to the club or no one's available locally to play. It's also really nice because you can play with miniatures you don't own. You just, use
as long as you have the Arsenal cards or your, Wave 2.
Right. You can just use the cards and then use the Vassal models to play with new crews. Try before you buy is always a good thing to have.
Yeah. But anyways, thank you for your time, Andrew. It's it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and hopefully we can get into more details on that whole card management thing. I might have to reschedule something else because I know it's going to take probably at least half an hour.
Let's talk again after you go to Adepticon. You can tell me all your stories. I'm going to be very jealous. I'm not going to get a chance to hang out with you guys this year and play Malifaux. I want to hear all your Adepticon stories, and we can talk more about how I want to see wins. I want to see how they do it, but we can talk more about these things in the future. And I'll see you around online. So I won't get to see you in Chicago.
All right, man. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Take care.